What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. Another great guest today. And we are going to learn about how companies figure out what kinds of technologies to buy. Now, I know all of you out there who are CEOs have a lot to do, and most of you are still involved in sales in some way. And you still have to make sure that you have phone systems that work, IT that works, other kinds of connectivity that works, right? You've got to have everything humming along so your salespeople can do their jobs. Well, the good news is there are people out there who can help you with these kinds of things. And today I'm lucky enough to talk with Matthew Toth from C3 Technology Advisors. Well, that's exactly what he does. And he's been doing it for 15 years. So he knows quite a bit about it. So it's going to be fun to hear his journey and then also hear maybe a few things. He'll give us a few tips on how CEOs can really make sure that they have the right technology that's being used properly and all that kind of stuff. So welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, Alice. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So just give us the short, story of what does your company offer to other companies today?
In a nutshell, technology consulting. So technology changes so often, it's difficult to pick the right vendors and the right technologies and know what the right price points are. We consult with our clients to make sure they pick the right ones and they implement the right solutions, and that ultimately those vendors are held to the promises they make.
Yeah, just in my own little company, we have 5 employees, but we have to choose things, and it makes me nervous because it's stuff I don't really understand or know about, right? Even just getting a solid internet connection to my house, because here we are, producing video over the internet. Sometimes I just really don't know what to do. So tell us a little bit about your customers and how you can help them.
Sure. So we typically focus on medium to medium enterprise. So think of it as about 500 to 15,000 employees. And they have, it could be anything from financial services to manufacturing, but they find themselves in this place where technology seems to be core to operating the organization. So as they move from one legacy technology to the other, they think to themselves, "Oh gosh, I've never made this kind of pivot before. I've never made this kind of a decision." So my typical buying process, speaking as a buyer, might be, all right, I'm going to Google this and I'm going to look for white papers and I might talk to a friend or two that might be in an adjacent business. And then
Yeah.
I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed I made the right decision. And what I love, because I used to can't come from the sales world where I'm just here to sell you this one product and I'm going to hope that it's the best fit. But now we'll come to that client and say, hey, you're in this vertical. Here are the top 5 solutions that we have found our clients like. Here are the price points that we think that you should be negotiating for. Here are the landmines that you're going to encounter in implementing this. And you go into this with a guide throughout the buying process. And I think you go into this buying process with so much more comfort, understanding that or having someone at your side that's done this literally hundreds of times before. So, and I love our business plan because in lieu of you paying us 20, 50, $100,000, we'll just make a small commission on the back end from whoever it is that you end up selecting through what's called the channel. So, and our company is participates in the channel today. So hopefully
I
that
love
makes
that.
sense.
I love that model because you are agnostic. It's like here's the thing. There's 5 brands. We vetted them. They're all good. You pick the one that's best for you and we're going to help you, but asking these questions and understanding your business so you can pick the very best one. And I think that's fantastic. Now, you just mentioned that you had been selling, in your previous career. So let's rewind now to back when you actually started this company 15 years ago. It's a long time to remember, but um, what were you doing? And then how did you get the idea to start the company?
Oh goodness. Well, I was in sales and sales management for about 8.5 years. And when I think of why I started C3, I think of two things in general. The first one is that I found the corporate ladder climbing to be fairly slippery. So you're always one relationship or one boss you don't see eye to eye with away from falling down a couple of rungs on that ladder. So the second one was just, every time I would talk to someone like you, Alice, and you'd say, hey, I have this technology need, I'd have to look at them and say, this is the best way to go. This is the only thing in your whole world that's going to solve all of your problems. By the way, what is your problem again? Oh, yes, of course, this solves for this too. And I found it to be, somewhere between, disingenuous all the way to dishonest. And it can be it's a difficult place to be. So I just thought to myself, it'd be wonderful if I actually talked to someone like you about your technology needs. And I'm just going to tell you exactly what I think. And I'm not going to actually really sell to you. I'm just going to say, hey, our last 5 clients that looked like you, this is what they bought. And I just thought, well, that sounds pretty honest. That seems like a good way to make a living. And I don't know, it seems less salesy and more like consulting. So I would say the only other reason why I started this too is, I feel like I came from certain cultures that broke societal norms on the regular. I mean, my first job in this world was at WorldCom, and if you put that into Wikipedia, you're going to see that in Enron. And I come from this world where just people lied at numbers only to satisfy their superiors, and it was always about sacrificing the long term for the numbers this month or this quarter or this year. And I didn't enjoy that world anymore. So
Yeah.
I decided to take the leap in 2008, and there is not a day that goes by that I'm not thankful I made that call.
Well, you're out to make the world a better place, which I just love. I think that's amazing. And you're helping to have a great company culture for people to live and work in. And you also are helping your customers to make good decisions. So that's got to feel good every single day, right?
It does. It does. And one of the things I think is interesting in starting this organization too is, I almost feel like sales is a lagging indicator of just doing the right things. If you build the right culture, you bring on the right people, and you have a good strategy, the numbers, the sales, the results ultimately come. So I always think, like, if I can do these things and build the foundation, this stuff just kind of grows. So I'm less focused on like the result of today versus the building of the foundation that will ultimately lead to that. And if you have
Yeah.
a long-term outlook on things, you know what, I don't want to say the future takes care of itself, but if you do these things, oftentimes it does.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. There's no doubt. Now, I'm just curious because I've talked to so many founders, right? Uh, how did you prepare to leave the work world, right, where you were getting a steady paycheck and jump into, oh, I'm just going to start this business? I mean, did you do a little side gig first, or did you just
No,
go, okay, I've saved up enough money, I'm out of here, I'm going to start this company?
I always had a rainy day fund. And I always, growing up, if you live in Michigan, your dad, you probably worked for Michigan, or excuse me, worked for Ford, GM, or Chrysler at some point in
Right.
time. And my mom worked for a school assistant for 30 years. And we didn't have a lot, but I feel like we saved money, and we always had that rainy day fund. And I brought that mentality with me, through life. So when I thought, when I don't say the world started crashing down, but when I feel like my career started going in a direction that I didn't like. By the way, that's Bob back here. You might see Bob here and there.
All
So
right.
yes, Bob's the chief dog officer.
Very good.
So
Very good.
I had that rainy day fund established, and I thought to myself, you know what? I lived on ramen noodles before in college. I can probably do it again. And kind of put this math in the back of a napkin and just said, all right, I can survive on 18 months based upon what I've got in my bank account. And I just thought to myself, it's like, if I do this, this is the point in time in my life when I can make this decision. I can make this call. And I decided to do it. I think it'd be more difficult if I had to do it when I was married, had children, larger obligations and such. But I was able to do it earlier in life, 15 and a half years ago.
Yeah, wow. So it was just you and you started out. And so how did you get your first customers?
When I my last job before I started C3, I had a pretty good sales career. And towards the end, when I was feeling that slippery rung and I was starting to slip on it, I went to my largest client and essentially said, "Hey, I think that I might start a business. So, and I want to know what you think because you're the largest client that I had ever worked with." And I just said, "I want to ask you this question: if I started an organization, would you go with me? And if you say yes, I'm going to go start this company. If you say maybe, I'm going to think about it. And if you say no, well, I'm going to think about it a little bit more." And I'll never forget. They said, "Matthew, we're with your current employer because we're with you." And it was a bolt of lightning, and it was something where in my mind I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to start a company." And it was at that very moment because I knew that even though there's about a 9-month lag time between the moment I would start the company and the moment I would make commissions on that account, I'm like, I can do the math in my head and I can survive that 9 months. Based upon just what I've made so far. But it's one of those defining moments in life, and you'll just never forget it, and I'll never forget it.
Wow. Okay. So you give your notice, you step out. I'm gathering you worked from home even way back then before it was popular to work from home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you,
absolutely.
yeah, right. Kind of fun. And then I was too. I was working from home way before it was popular work from home. You step out and here you are, and you're like, okay, now I've got to get all these vendors lined up and I've got to go get some more clients. And so tell us about those early days.
Oh man, when you are starting your business, you are hustling for every dollar. Like the clients that you would scoff at today, 15 and a half years ago when you have no money coming in, you go after each and every single one of them with this gusto, with this vigor. And that's really what I did for the first, 3 or so years. If you
And
had
that
10
that
bucks to
selling
spend,
experience really helped you too, right? Because you knew you had to get out there and hustle, you had to sell.
absolutely. And you have to go out there and grind. And one of the things we talked about even before we got on is, hey, is it an advantage starting the company being a former salesperson? I would tell you yes, because I feel like most salespeople at some point in their career had to grind it out. They made calls. There was this activity, and you still have that in your DNA if you're really successful as a salesperson. And I feel like I did at that point. So I just decided I'm going to go grind this thing out, and I've got enough money to make it through, year one and some change. And now that I know I have that anchor tenant client, I went out there and said, "Hey, Mr. Customer, I'm going to be in business for the next 20 or 30 years. Even though I have $0 of revenue, I know I'm going to make it." And there was never this moment in time when I thought to myself, well, if it didn't work out, I can go get a job in corporate America. It was, I am going to make this. I will scratch and claw for every dollar until this thing gets going. But there was never any turning back.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is so powerful to have that kind of confidence and to feel so invested in something. So all right, you're doing this. You said a couple of years, you're out there just grinding, selling. Yeah, you had to also get your vendors set up. And of course, you're running a company, right? You got to pay the bills. You got to make all the paperwork stuff go
Yeah,
and do all the
bottle
things that
washer, everything.
exactly empty that trash. You got to do it all.
Mhm.
Where was the point where you said, all right, I am going to need an employee. I'm going to have to start hiring some people. And then was it sales or was it support or where did you decide to really put your first hires?
Oh boy. It was about it's probably about 2.5, 3 years in. So to the point, because there's in our industry, there's such a lag time between, when you meet someone to uncovering an opportunity, to selling it, to installing
Yeah.
it, to making money on it. So it really took a couple of years before we got to that point. This is a strange answer, but I thought that this business would go down one of two tracks. And one might be I would just do this by myself forever and make a very good living as this independent consultant and do better than I thought I ever could. And there's a funny thing happened on the way to this business plan is I kind of got lonely. And I didn't have, I wasn't married. I didn't have any children at the time, and I'm working out of my house. And I was just like, is this it? I mean, is this the whole thing? And I felt like I was like, well, I could probably teach someone this craft. And and there was definitely this loneliness that was in there. So through a friend of a friend, I met this guy named Tim. And I thought to myself, I met this guy and I'd seen him in social gatherings and stuff. And I asked him, I was like, so what do you do? He said, I'm in hospital analytics. Hospital analytics? You have way too much personality for hospital analytics. You're the life of the party. So why are you in hospital analytics? And I thought to myself, this guy is this amazing piece of clay. And I think that this guy could be something, and I've got time in the day to actually train somebody. So I convinced him and his pregnant wife that he should leave his job to go work for essentially a startup where I'm going to pay him with paper checks because we don't have an outsourced HR. Are you kidding me? It's me and Bob at the end of the day. So um and it was at that point that we brought on our first employee, and he's been here for 12 and a half years. He's been
Wow.
here ever since then, and he's led sales for 10 of those 12 years. And
Wow. When you first brought him, so first of all, great job convincing him, great job selling him and his pregnant wife on quitting a
I'm a
job
I'm a
where
good salesperson. I'll just throw that out there.
he had stability and real payroll and probably benefits, right?
Yeah.
And you got him to come over, and I'm sure he thought it was very exciting, and I'm sure it ended up for him being much more fun than hospital analytics. But in those early days, what did you do? How did you train him? Because here's the thing that I hear from founders all the time: the first few sales hires are a mistake, a problem. They don't work out very well. And part of it's because if they have a sales background and they know how to sell and they just are doing it, they don't have a written process or any playbook to hand over or anything like. So it's like, basically, if you want to learn how to sell like I do, you got to just follow me around, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way a lot of people start. But sometimes it doesn't work out, or you took a person and molded them. Sometimes we hire people who already have sales experience, but it's the wrong kind, or they're not gritty enough to work for a startup, or whatever it is. So tell us about what you did and what some of the magic was that made this turn out to be so successful.
Oh goodness. You are very right though. There is no training manual when you hire your first employee. So there's two things that do come to mind. The first one is yes, there's this informal osmosis type training of like, hey, watch me while I'm on these meetings. I'm going to bring you into all these calls that I am on. But the other thing that I did is, and he'll still laugh about this to this day, is if you need to do a technology project back in 2010, this is still the same way today, and you're a healthcare organization, you're getting federal funding and such, you have to put publicly facing RFPs out there. So they really need to take in all these bids. So if for myself, for that first employee coming on board, I just said, you are going to go after all of these publicly facing RFPs that have probably no better than a 1 to 2% win rate, but you will get so many at bats. So imagine being a 16-year-old kid and someone throwing 97 mile an hour fastballs at you. And for about the first 200 of those, you whiff. But you know what? Then you foul tip them. And then the next thing you know, you put one in left field, and you start hitting those. But he got so many repetitions from that it was just a wonderful training ground for him. So we both joke about it because you've got to have essentially no soul, and you've got to take insults essentially all day long because you're going after publicly facing RFPs. It's not glorious work, but it was a wonderful training ground for him.
Yeah, what a great way to learn. And you learn a lot about these organizations. And then if you're smart, you learn how to kind of wiggle your way into be able to talk to some people, even when they've told you, oh, fill out the RFP, you can't talk to anybody, right? But if you're good at sales, you figure it out.
Yeah, and he did. And I knew he had that. He was that piece of clay. Like he was
Yeah.
that guy that was social. And I think he was truly just someone that other people see him and say, I would like to spend time with this person. And if there's like just one thing that makes for good salespeople, other people have to look at this person and say, I would like to devote energy or time to working with this other person. And I just felt like this guy was one would be one of those people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's wonderful. I think there's a lot to be said for the right personality, the right type of person. And when you are starting up, especially, right, you're entrepreneurial, you got to hire somebody entrepreneurial. They've got to know that, hey,
Mm.
I take the trash out, you might have to take it out sometimes too, right? And when we get those kinds of people and they're open and willing and smart, my gosh, we can teach them to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that point. I do think your first hire, your first two or three hires all have to be entrepreneurial. I think on the first three or four iterations of our website, we talked about the kind of people we're bringing in having this entrepreneurial spirit. You may not have a stake in the business, but if you're not acting like it, you probably won't make it.
Oh gosh, I love that. If you don't have a stake in this, right? You probably should just go find something else because it's tough road in the beginning, but it can also be so much fun, so challenging, and you can learn a lot. All right, so you've got one employee. He's following you around. You gave him a lot of at bats by putting him in front of those RFPs. He whiffed a bunch. Oh well, keep going. Right? Where was the point where you said, okay, it's just the two of us, but if we really want to grow this thing and blow it out, we're going to have to hire some help? Where was that point, and what did you do next?
I think at the moment that he started getting some momentum, and I knew that his business, like when you hire employee one, it's like you're just trying to get that first pulse. You get that first pulse, and you see, all right, like I've got health, I've got a growth rate. At the minute I'm right here, and I know the end of his journey is way, way out there, but I know based upon who he is and the kind of momentum he has at the moment I get to about right here, I'm like, I can hire the next person. So, because he has this upward trajectory, and I don't need to wait till he's making several $100,000 a year because I had faith in what we were doing and his ability to be an amazing salesperson. So then I started reaching into my network of people that I used to work with in the past, and two of the things that I did early on is I seeded my network with, hey, I started C3, and if this thing really works out, when it works out, I'm going to come for you one day. And I would throw those seeds out there. And it would be years later where I would say, I made it. Here I am. Now I would like you to join us. But it wasn't like I um, started convincing this person at that moment in time. It was years ago that I planted this in people's minds. And that's still something that I do today from a recruiting perspective, where I'll talk to somebody and say, hey, look, I can't afford you today, or you're really happy in your job. But at that moment in time when, maybe your cart turns into a gigantic pumpkin, I would like you to evaluate coming over here. So I had started that at the very beginning before I had a dollar of revenue. I went to some of those people and just said, when this thing works out, I would like you on board. And I started asking those people when we did make it, And I got some yeses. I
And
waited for
some
that
of them
moment in
didn't.
time in their career when it made sense.
Yeah, this is amazing. And I really want to take a pause here and get all of our listeners engaged in this. What you did, I call that building bench strength, right? So we have great employees, things are going well, either we're growing or somebody leaves. And all of a sudden, from scratch, we're getting candidates that we don't know because we just put out an ad or had a recruiter get some candidates. And we're, in a lot of cases, picking the best of the worst because it's like, oh, well, we put out a job description. This is who applied. We'll just pick one. Terrible, right? We always should be out talking to people, identifying people. Like, even when I'm in a restaurant and I get a really great server, I get their name, I get their number, I get their email address, because those people could be great salespeople someday, if they're interested, right? And so I'm always looking for people. I work with someone at a company and I think they're really great. And then I go on and consult with another company. And sometimes people are ready to move, right? But I've got those relationships. I know what these people are good at. I love that you built that bench strength. And I'm imploring everyone listening, whether you're the CEO or the senior leaders, build your bench strength. Look for these people. When you meet people at conferences, people you used to work with, you keep your own list, just like a pipeline for sales. You keep a pipeline of people so you can go to them when you're ready and get the best players.
Yeah, absolutely. Of all the things, like when I do talk to other CEOs, I like to talk to them and just say, you should be the chief recruiter for your
Right,
organization. So, and this is always, and you're always recruiting for even needs that you don't have yet. So, and no one can tell the story about your origination like you can.
right.
So, uh, yeah, make sure you're constantly throwing this out here. And by the way, you're throwing this out there years in advance. Like there's people I'm going after today that I'm sure won't join me for 5 or even 10 years down the road. But it's not going to be a shock, and it's not going to be such a job convincing them when they do come here 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah.
I think that's something you always have to be doing.
And I think that CEOs, especially, but senior leaders as well, should think about what their brand is, right? So that are people looking at you saying, oh, that's somebody I'd like to work for? He's always putting out good content. He's always complimenting his employees online. He's building something, it's growing, right? They can see you, they can see that. And they think, yeah, I want to hang around with people like that, right? So put yourself out there as a leader and let people see you and build that brand as being someone that people will want to work for. That will help you tremendously when it comes time to recruit.
I couldn't agree more. I think it also, by putting yourself out there, I think it also provides at least somewhat the illusion that you're larger than you are. Because
Yeah.
no one wants to tell all their friends and family, I'm working for a company that's only got 2 or 3 employees. Like everyone wants to say that, hey, we're working for someone that's the Fortune 500. But if you put good content out there and you're mindful of your audience, you start to look bigger than you are by
Mhm.
doing those things, and I think that'll help in your recruitment efforts.
Now, I know you have some hefty goals for hitting some pretty big revenue targets, which, amazing, right? So tell us what your sales organization looks like today and how you're bringing in new clients now.
Sure. There are 10 sales folks that are doing a majority of hunting, but they do some farming. There are 3 folks that are just focused on farming then as well. So uh, as far as bringing on new accounts goes, our go-to-market strategy has to do a lot with events. So I know that when I got in this game in 2000, maybe one of every 3 calls you'd make, someone would pick up that phone and go, "Hello, this is Larry," and there's at some point over the last 5, 10 years, well, folks don't pick up the phone like they used to, and they don't respond to emails as well. So one of the things we're thinking about now is like, okay, how do you get people's attention? So one of the ways that we've done that is, well, I think we do a great job hiring, but how can we get them to interact with people in real time? So we have in a team of 39 people, we have 5 people actually going on 6. We have a 6th coming on board pretty soon. And they're about 2/3 of that strategy for that whole marketing department is based on events. So I want to get our folks out from behind their desk and interacting with people in a public setting. And oh, by the way, and let's just say in this public setting, there's 25 or 30 people and there's 5 or 6 existing C3 clients, and they go around and say, boy, we've loved working with C3. So they've been a wonderful organization. They do our selling for us. So we're focused on that, and that tends to work out pretty well for us. So it's a kind of a combination of events and thought leadership.
I think that event driven lead generation is a great way to go right now because you're right. People aren't answering their phones. Maybe it was 1 in 3 when you and I were young trying to get these people. Now it's 1 in 100 that answer their phone. I mean, it is really hard. And the same with email. Nobody needs another email in their inbox. That's for sure. And unless you're really good at subject lines and even when you are, people just don't want to read emails. So events, especially live right now, I feel like people are craving it. They want to get out and meet the others in their community. They want to get out and meet others like themselves who run similar types of companies or do similar types of things. And they want to learn. They're super hungry for information. And like you said at the beginning of the call, technology is changing so fast. I have to keep myself current, right? How do I do that? And how do I do that and have a little fun and meet a few people, right? Go to
Right.
an event. So I really love that strategy, and I'm glad that's working for you. Your company sounds amazing. Exactly the kind of company that we all want to work for. So congratulations on that. And just before we go, I have a couple quick questions for you, Matthew. All right. So the first question is, what is a book that you think every CEO should read?
This one is an easy one for me because as an organization, we're reading this for a second time, and that one is called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. So Kim Scott worked for Google. She worked for Apple, and I want to say there's one other one in there. And she talks about the value of radical candor and how it makes people better. There's so many personal stories in the book. It is exceptional. I would not only suggest that leaders read it, but I would have their team lead it, at least the leadership team read it, and then you all can start communicating in a similar language, much of which would be seeded from this book.
Oh my gosh. Excellent. Well, I have not read that yet. It's been on my list for a while, but I think I'm going to move it up now because that sounds amazing.
Yes, do that.
All right. Next, what is a podcast you love because it makes you think differently?
Boy, I'm going to do 2 that are entirely different. And on my podcast list, there's probably about 20 or 30. Um, Tim Ferriss is really good. So I've been listening to Tim Ferriss, and he is always bringing on inspirational people and thought leaders. And I think he's a very talented questioner, is an interviewer. So I thought he does a really good job. I don't know how much business value there is in this one, but like Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. So
Oh,
he takes these things that have happened in our past and he talks about them in long form. And I think he's done World War One for 30 hours and World War II for 30 hours, and he talks
wow.
about what's happening in Winston Churchill's head and what's happening in Woodrow Wilson's head in World War One. And I mean, he paints this extraordinary picture, and it's absolutely it's fairly incredible. So I would say those 2, and then maybe Prof G Scott Galloway, who teaches at NYU,
Oh,
and
I love Scott Galloway.
yeah, Scott Galloway. I all things Scott Galloway from Prof G Markets to his gig with Kara Swisher with Pivot. So
Yeah.
those 3
Yeah.
are top of mind for me.
Very good. Very good. All right. Last one. What does every CEO need to know to win in this marketplace?
If I had to say, if I had to say this, I would say people. I would say getting the right people and retaining the right people. So I think that C3 will be more successful than the average company that has 39 employees at this moment in time, because I'm simply going to be able to hold on to my best people better than most others. So when other folks think like more revenue and what about these products and what can I do over here, I think my biggest KPI that I'm measuring myself on is year over year, do I have extraordinary people? So, and sales and results are a lagging indicator of me having really extraordinary people. So, don't sleep on your people. So, think of how you can invest in them, um, how you can ensure that mentally they are feeling taken care of, and that you actually care about them as a person,
Yeah.
and that you want them to be a success, and that they're not just solely a tool for your own success. If you can do that, I think you'll find success. Again, your own success is a lagging indicator of those things, but you do those things, and I don't care what you're selling. You could be selling technology or remote controls, and I don't think it'll matter if you're taking really good care of your people and you have a continual pipeline of really good folks.
I could not agree with you more because, there's all this talk about customer experience. Well, listen, only great employees give great customer experience, right? And so we
Absolutely.
need to think about customer experience, yes, of course, in conjunction with employee experience and what's that like. So it starts with hiring the best and keeping them. And that to keep them, you've got to engage them, you've got to help them grow, develop, and show them that there's a great future. So, oh my goodness, Matthew, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you.
I appreciate the kudos, and it's a real pleasure to meet you too and talk with you. And yeah, love to continue the conversation.
All right, and just tell the audience where they can find you in case they need your services.
www.c3techadvisors.com. And even some of these events that we're having in the Midwest that you can find on our website as well.
Wonderful. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.